Former Trump attorney Jenna Ellis is not down with Christian nationalism. Recently speaking to Newsmax, Ellis responded to the recent vandalism of the Satanic Temple display in Iowa. So that was the display that a lot of right-wingers were getting very, very upset, a little butthurt over. Last week, the Iowa display was destroyed, beheaded, specifically by a former Republican state of Mississippi official named Michael Cassidy, who claims on his website to, quote, love our nation and is committed to preserving the blessings of liberty bestowed upon us by the founding generation, except for apparently that whole First Amendment thing doesn't count unless you're, a Christian. At least that's according to their beliefs. So Ellis told Newsweek that, quote, we should be advocating for a well-ordered society that protects religious freedom and liberty for all. Based. Yes, we should. And by the way, based just means that she is correct, that a person is correct. They are based in facts and logic, and in this case, the Constitution. So her issue, though, with Christian nationalism is that it doesn't do any of that. Which, again, she would be correct. Many people think, she writes, I'm a Christian and I also believe in sovereign nations instead of globalism, so I'm a Christian nationalist. But that's dangerously misunderstanding the anti-liberty ideology main Christian nationalist proponents advocate. They openly but purposefully vaguely advocate in undermining the Constitution and rule of law, replacing it with a theocracy including blasphemy laws and criminalizing other religions and their practice. She goes on to say that the state cannot and should not compel an individual to certain beliefs, nor restrain free exercise of religion. This necessarily includes all belief systems, even atheism, and the right to believe there is no God. Okay, so right there, yeah, I agree. She gets that. We have a right-winger that understands what the First Amendment means. Hallelujah. I'm not a believer, but in any way, hallelujah. I'll say it again. So it's a pretty simple thing, okay? Yes, the First Amendment says, hey, everybody can have their own religious belief systems and that the government is supposed to treat them all equally and not get involved. Great. I mean, honestly, do you really want the government getting involved in your religion anyway? Telling you that you can and can't do this particular religious thing? I wouldn't. I'm not a religious person, but if I was, I wouldn't want the government telling me how to practice my religion. Ridiculous. Nobody should want that. But Christian nationalists do. And basically they want the government to tell you what to do with your religion, how to practice your religion. No, not at all. No, this is not a good thing. So now the next part, of course, is where she loses me with bad comparisons, because I got to point it out. She says, as a Christian, I hate the statue that was placed at the Iowa Capitol, which, by the way, it's her right to hate it. Whatever. I don't care about that. But I also recognize that in a well-ordered society, the state can and must punish individuals like former congressional candidate who vandalized the Satanic Temple display, Michael Cassidy. Okay, I'm totally fine there. But then she says, or Black Lives Matter rioters. Of course. Who destroy property of others with their statues, storefronts, or other property. No person is justified in destruction of others' property to advance their ideology. Our nation is founded on liberty and justice for all. Now, look, by the way, it's not that I disagree with that. Yeah, if you're a rioter, then yeah, of course I'm going to be like, of course you should not do rioting. That's not a good thing. But the thing that I have the issue with is casting the entire Black Lives Matter movement as just rioters. The BLM protests were 93% peaceful. You think the people that did property damage went unpunished? No, of course not. They were immediately punished. Very harshly, by the way. And not only that, but you had a lot of innocent people who ended up getting roped into charges as well. I mean, ridiculous charges. And guess what? The vast majority of them ended up having their cases dropped. When nobody was talking about right. And by the way, you still have the right mainly talking about riots, but you had both mainstream media and right-wing media that were saying, oh, riot, look at that, somebody set an Arby's on fire. Okay, yeah, you shouldn't do that. It shouldn't break glass in storefronts, shouldn't do any of that. But they completely ignored, for the most part, the vast majority of the protests, which were, again, peaceful. So that's the issue, right? And look, according to Truthout, over 90% of charges in cities analyzed by The Guardian, who did a big old analysis on many big cities, and they followed the arrests and they followed the cases of these supposed rioters, over 90% of the charges were dropped due to lack of evidence to support the charges, which means police just rounded up a whole bunch of people and charged them, with rioting and doing criminal acts, vandalism, whatever, and then they didn't have the evidence to support those charges, and so it just had to drop. Oops. In Houston and LA, for example, The Guardian found 93% of charges were either dropped or never filed. In some cities like Dallas and Philadelphia, the number rose to 95% of charges dropped or never prosecuted. Meanwhile, in San Francisco, 100%, yes, 100% of the 127 cases related to peaceful protesting were dropped. Oops. Wow. Oh, such a high percentage. Suggests that the police may have been arresting people to suppress dissent, at the Guardian report. Oops. Wow. And there we have it.
Whoopsie.
Yeah. Now look, how un-American is that? Well, actually, when you look at the history of how civil rights protests have been handled in this country, traditionally, it's actually about as American as apple pie, which is kind of the problem, where you have racial justice protests that are massively over-policed, and everyone that's actually doing the protesting are crushed. Yeah, big problem. Turns out apple's kind of rotten, like the culture of policing in this country. Nonetheless, Ellis is going to make this comparison because she's a conservative, and she's massively conservative, and that's her perspective, right? And so I actually kind of think it's funny that she is actually dissing Christian nationalists, and probably, from her point of view, the worst way, by comparing them to racial justice protesters. Oh, they must hate that. That's got to sting. Oh, compare me to a BLM person. I can't handle it. You've made me very angry. Now, look, here's what she writes. In the December 16th post on X/Twitter, the Christian nationalist crowd is the new BLM. No, they're not. Both cheer tearing down statues and destroying property they don't like in the name of their cause. Both are wrong. Oh, God, the false equivalence. It burns, doesn't it? I mean, my God, she was doing so well at first. I was cheering for you. And then you had to go and say the stuff about BLM. No, they're not Black Lives Matter, because there's actually no core here that is at all in favor of justice in the white nationalist movement. No, the Christian nationalist movement, they're pretty much the same, though, when you think about it. And look, she was actually saying that in an argument against Charlie Kirk, who, by the way, and still ends up being the worst here, okay, because he's out there praising Christian vandalism. Here's what he said in a December 14th post. A Christian veteran just beheaded a monument to Satan in Iowa State Capitol. If this is Christian nationalism, we need more of it. Hero. Well, it is Christian nationalism, but it's also, again, vandalism. And it is absolutely wrong. Not the same as Black Lives Matter, which, again, has a social, racial justice component to it. Whereas this is just, I don't like it, it hurt my fifis, so I'm going to go and destroy it. Because that's what happened here. Now, she responded by saying, of course, that she disagrees, and saying destruction of property is not okay for the Christian who hates a satanic statue any more than it's okay for the Satanist who hates a nativity scene. Again, there's a false equivalence going on here, because I don't think there's ever been a case of a Satanist destroying a nativity scene. Not a single one. But overall, though, yes, is she correct that Christian nationalists want a theocracy? Yes, and it's a tainted ideology that basically wants special laws and protections for the people who adhere to it, and of course to want to punish non-believers. This is not the majority of Christians in this country. So let me be very, very, very clear about that. The majority of Christians in this country are not Christian nationalists, okay? Majority of Christians in this country actually do believe in America. And actually, for the most part, they're aligned with Jenna Ellis in saying, I don't care about, you practicing your religion, whatever. We have freedom. It is called the First Amendment. It is called freedom of religion. You do what you want. I do what I want. Well, that's America, right? And so, yes, I will disagree with Ellis on some of the other weirdo things that she said. But as far as the core here, I do agree with her. She is correct. Yes, the Christian nationalism is a big, big problem. And it is kind of refreshing to at least see people that are on the right wing that are recognizing this. And here's the other thing, right? In order to get their Christian theocracy that the Christian nationalists are, pushing for, is that they've got to make up ways in order to make them feel oppressed. So this is part of that. Oh no, they put up a Satanist display in Iowa. Oh, I am so oppressed by having to see this thing that I disagree with. But again, you had a Republican state representative, and then you have Ellis that are like, hey, I'm personally offended by this statue. I don't like it. But you know what? It's called freedom. Suck it up. Don't be a baby. And I agree with that. Yes, there are so many things that I see that people do that I'm offended by. I don't care. Do what you have to do. Just because I'm personally offended by something doesn't mean that I'm going to force you to tear it down. You got something on your lawn, whatever, that offends me, like, whatever, roll your eyes. Move on. Move on. Don't be a baby. No, people are going to have, this is part of being in an open society in this country, is that we're going to see things that we don't agree with. We're going to see things that offend us once in a while. But you know what? As long as it's not hurting anybody else, I don't care. Move on. Don't be a baby. Now, again, this is different when we're talking about you're actively going and making somebody's life incredibly difficult, right? You're going after trans people, for example. You're denying them the ability to play sports or something like that. Then that is definitely something. It's not just about being offended. It's about, hey, you were actively infringing on somebody's civil rights, okay? But this is not it. Putting up a display, who cares? Don't be a freaking baby. Don't be a little bitch, and just move on. If you don't like it, you don't like it. And I'm going to, again, non-ironically say, be more like Jenna on this one. If you're going to be like Jenna Ellis on anything, at least when it comes to the First Amendment, being a religious person and seeing a religious display that you don't like or don't agree with, be like Jenna and just move the F on. All right? Move on and recognize that other people also have freedom of religion in this country. And that's kind of the things that makes our pluralistic society, our society that, it is able to have people with different religions and different religious beliefs get along with each other. That's how it makes the whole thing work. And if you break that, then you fundamentally break America.